The champagne flute nearly slipped from my grip as my sister's words cut through the celebratory din of the country club banquet. It's just embarrassing, honestly. Sarah and her little restaurant job, Dad's paying for her rent again this month. Diana's voice carried just enough to reach me as I approached their table, gift bag in hand. My father, whose birthday we were celebrating, nodded in solemn agreement while my mother patted his arm sympathetically. They hadn't seen me yet. 3 feet away, I stood frozen in my simple black dress, the one Diana had mocked last Christmas as clearance rack chic. The bartender caught my eye with a look of concern. He recognized me immediately, though not as the struggling eldest Walker daughter my family was describing. No, he knew me as the owner who had approved his salary increase last month. My name is Nicole. I'm 32 and a restaurant owner. This is the story of how I transformed from family disappointment to the empire they never saw coming. 6 months ago, I'd purchased Harrington Country Club, the very establishment where my family had flaunted their membership for decades. I hadn't told them, just like I hadn't mentioned buying Lumière, the French restaurant where they celebrated every special occasion, or Castillo, where my sister hosted her engagement party, or the 29 other high-end establishments across 3 continents that comprised Walker Restaurant Group, named with a private satisfaction they'd never appreciated. I'd lived modestly by choice, reinvesting profits rather than flaunting wealth. My apartment was small but functional, my wardrobe practical rather than designer-filled. These choices weren't from necessity but priority, something my status-obsessed family never understood. Poor Sarah, my mother sighed, adjusting her diamond bracelet. If only she'd taken that position at your firm, Richard. My father swirled his scotch. Too stubborn for her own good. Restaurant management instead of finance? What a waste of potential. The words echoed previous conversations, ones where they'd refused to support my MBA in hospitality management, where they'd laughed at my business plan, where they'd introduced me at family gatherings as Sarah still figuring things out, while Diana was following in her father's footsteps. I straightened my shoulders and approached their table. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said, placing the small gift beside his plate. Diana looked up, her smile tightening when she saw me. "Oh, Sarah. We didn't see you there." Her eyes flicked dismissively over my dress. "Glad you could make it. We were just discussing the new chef here. Isn't the food divine?" "The scallops are particularly good," I agreed, taking the empty seat. "Chef Liam has an innovative approach to seafood." My father frowned. "You've eaten here before? I thought this place was outside your budget constraints." "I manage," I said simply. "Well," my mother interjected, clearly trying to change the subject, "Diana was just telling us about their trip to Paris. They dined at Lumière. Richard, remember when we had to wait 6 months for a reservation there?" Diana preened. The maitre d' recognized the Walker name immediately. We were seated at the best table. "Of course they did," I murmured, accepting the wine list from the approaching server. "Ms. Walker," he said respectfully, "Chef Liam mentioned you might stop by tonight. He's prepared something special for the table." My father's hand paused midway to his glass. My mother's smile froze. Diana's eyes darted between me and the server. "Thank you, Brett," I replied. "That would be lovely." As Brett departed, silence descended on the table. My father cleared his throat. "You know the chef here?" I took a sip of water, savoring the moment. "I know all my chefs, Dad." "Your chefs?" Diana's voice rose slightly. "Yes," I set down my glass. "All 32 of them." 32 what? My mother's fork clattered against her plate. "Restaurants," I said calmly, "including this country club, Lumière in Paris, and Castillo, where you hosted your engagement party last spring, Diana." The silence that followed had weight, density, texture. My father's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and something approaching fear. Diana's mouth opened and closed without sound. "That's not possible," my father finally managed. "You live in that tiny apartment. You shop at normal stores. You dash." "Because I choose to," I interrupted. "Unlike some people, I don't measure success by what I wear or where I live." Brett returned with a bottle of wine, a rare vintage worth more than Diana's designer purse. "Your usual selection, Ms. Walker?" "Perfect. Thank you." As Brett poured, I watched realization dawn across their faces. "6 years ago," I continued, "when you refused to support my MBA program, told me I was wasting my potential on serving food, I took out loans. When you bragged about Diana's junior position at your firm while dismissing my little restaurant job, I was restructuring Lumiere from near bankruptcy to the most exclusive reservation in the city. I leveraged that first success to secure investor funding for my second and third acquisitions, and within 3 years had established enough credibility with banks to expand internationally. My phone buzzed, likely my London team with updates on our newest location. I ignored it. "But your apartment," my mother whispered. "Your clothes." "Our choices," I finished. "I prefer investing in my staff's healthcare and education benefits rather than showing off wealth I don't need to prove." Chef Liam approached personally with the first course, a dish not yet on the regular menu. "Ms. Walker, I'd value your opinion on this new scallop preparation before we add it to the permanent menu." "Thank you, Liam. It looks exquisite." As he departed, my father leaned forward, his investment banker brain visibly calculating the value of my empire. "Sarah, why didn't you tell us?" "Why would I?" I sampled the scallop, perfectly seared. "You made it abundantly clear that my career choice wasn't worth acknowledging." Diana's phone buzzed, probably one of her country club friends who'd spotted us and was spreading the word about who really owned their favorite establishment. "Is that why you never joined our family vacations?" my mother asked. "You said you couldn't afford to come to London last summer." "I was in London," I replied, "overseeing construction of my new restaurant. I just stayed in my penthouse instead of the family hotel." Brett approached again. "Ms. Walker, that investment group is calling again. They're offering to buy the restaurant chain." "Tell them what I always tell them, Brett. Not for sale at any price." My father nearly dropped his glass. "Investment group?" "Morgan Stanley," I said casually. "They've been trying to acquire us for months, offered 12 times earnings last week." The look on his face, the investment banker who had dismissed my business plan years ago, was priceless. "About reservations," Diana began, calculation replacing shock. "I'd love to bring some friends to Lumiere next month." "Your name doesn't guarantee special treatment anymore," I cut her off. "In fact, you might find some of our establishments mysteriously booked when you call." "But the staff tells me everything, Diana. Our customer management system flags your name and alerts managers whenever you make reservations. Every attempted name drop, every time you were rude to my employees, every complaint about prices that you charged to Dad's account." I smiled. "I know everything that happens in my restaurants." My mother tried a different approach. "Darling, you must let us host a celebration. To think our daughter is such a successful restaurant owner." "Funny," I observed. "That wasn't worth celebrating when you thought I was just managing one place." Brett appeared with a folder. "The wine list for London, Ms. Walker, and Mr. Thompson called about the Tokyo location." My father's head snapped up. "Tokyo? Opening next spring," I confirmed, "though I'm sure Diana can tell you all about it. She was just there last month trying to use the Walker name to get a reservation at my Paris restaurant. Our reservation system is integrated across all locations, so I receive notifications when family members book tables." Diana had the grace to blush. I didn't know. Clearly. I stood, smoothing my dress, actually a handmade piece from a small Parisian atelier. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to speak with my chef." But it's Dad's birthday dinner, my mother protested weakly. And I've paid for it, I replied, as I've paid for every meal you've had in my establishments for the past year without your knowledge. Our system automatically identifies Walker family credit cards, but processes them normally. I gestured to Brett. Please make sure my family has everything they need. Add the usual gratuity to their bill. Their bill? Diana squeaked. Of course, I smiled. Just because I own the place doesn't mean everything's free. That wouldn't be good business, would it, Dad? In the kitchen, Chef Liam greeted me with enthusiasm, showing me the planned menu for London. Through the kitchen's viewing window, I could see my family huddled in uncomfortable conversation. My phone buzzed with texts from Diana. I'm sorry for everything, for how we treated you. From Mom. We were wrong, so wrong. And finally, from Dad. I never saw it. Your vision, your potential. Can we talk, please? I typed a single response to all of them. Reservations required. 3-month waiting list, no exceptions. Then I turned back to Chef Liam's brilliant creations, to the empire I'd built while they weren't watching, to the success they'd never seen coming. Later that night, as I walked through my modest apartment, actually the entire top floor of the building, minimally furnished because I preferred it that way, I looked at the framed review from when I'd first bought Lumiere. Unknown buyer transforms struggling restaurant into culinary empire. Unknown, underestimated, unstoppable. I picked up my phone and sent one final text to my family. Next time you judge someone's worth, remember the person you're looking down on might actually own the ground you're standing on. Then I opened my laptop to review plans for the Tokyo location. After all, success isn't about proving others wrong, it's about continuing to prove yourself right. And sometimes, the sweetest taste isn't in the finest wine or the perfect scallop. It's in the moment they realize they've been dining in your success all along. The certificate in my hand felt insubstantial as tissue paper. The regional business competition award I'd been excited to share now seemed childish. Useless girl, you were never the bright one. My father's voice carried across the living room, slicing through conversation like a blade. My relatives froze, wine glasses suspended, eyes darting anywhere but at me. The pride I'd felt evaporated, replaced by a familiar hollowness. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet as I stood there, exposed. My name is Olivia Reed. I'm 31 and the founder of a tech startup. This is the story of how I forced my family to finally see me. Growing up in Columbus in the shadow of my brother Nathan had been an exercise in invisibility. Nathan was the golden child. My accomplishments were brushed aside like crumbs from the dinner table. Dad, I was thinking about expanding the company into... I began, despite the knot in my stomach. Olivia, please, my father interrupted. Your brother just secured $1 million contract. Can we focus on actual success for a moment? My mother gave me a sympathetic glance, but remained silent. My Aunt Patricia patted my hand and whispered, Maybe business isn't your thing, dear. You were always so good with your little crafts. Little crafts? My tech startup that had been growing for 3 years was reduced to a hobby in their eyes. I nodded politely and excused myself to the kitchen. My phone buzzed, a text from my business partner, Mia. Did you tell them about the investor meeting? I typed back, Not yet, timing's not right. What I didn't say was that the timing would never be right in this house. My father had decided long ago that I lacked what it took to succeed. Too emotional, he'd say, not strategic enough. And my personal favorite, not CEO material. I rejoined the family gathering with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Little did they know, this dismissal was fueling something inside me that would soon force them all to see me. The next day, I arrived at our office space in a renovated warehouse. My company, NeuroSync, had started as an idea sketched on napkins during lunch breaks at my former software development job. Now we occupied half a floor with 15 employees and technology making waves in predictive analytics. Mia looked up as I entered. That bad, huh? She asked, sliding a coffee toward me. Same story, different day, I replied. Nathan secured some contract with the state government, and you'd think he'd solved world hunger. And meanwhile, we're just revolutionizing how businesses understand consumer behavior. Nothing important. The investor meeting is confirmed for Thursday, she continued. Westlake Ventures wants to see the new algorithm in action. When it goes well, I corrected her, we'll have the capital to scale up and take on Horizon Data directly. Horizon Data was our main competitor, a company that had rejected my job application, suggesting I look into something less technical. That rejection letter still sat in my desk drawer. Back at my childhood home, there were other reminders. Photographs of Nathan receiving awards dominated the mantelpiece. My graduation photo was somewhere in a dusty album, rarely seen. For 3 years, I had lived in a tiny apartment, eating ramen noodles and pouring every dollar back into NeuroSync. I'd started with my own savings and a small business loan, supplemented by an angel investment from a tech mentor I'd met during my time at Columbus Tech Incubator. I worked 18-hour days, all while hearing my father's voice. Useless girl, you were never the bright one. The conference room at Westlake Ventures felt too warm. I adjusted my blazer and glanced at Mia, who gave me a subtle nod. As you can see from our projections, I continued, NeuroSync's algorithm has consistently outperformed market standards by 27%. What this means is an unprecedented level of customer behavior prediction. Gregory Westlake leaned forward. And your competitors? How does Horizon Data's new platform compare? Horizon's approach relies on historical data sets. Our algorithm incorporates real-time emotional response indicators. Simply put, they can tell you what customers did yesterday. We can tell you what they'll do tomorrow. 2 hours later, Mia and I stood in the lobby, still in shock. Westlake had not only agreed to invest, they wanted to lead a funding round that would value NeuroSync at $90 million. My phone rang. It was my mother, reminding me about my father's retirement party. Maybe you can bring those cookies you used to make. Everyone always liked those. The contrast was almost comical. In one moment, I was negotiating a multi-million-dollar deal. In the next, I was being asked to bring cookies to celebrate someone else's success. The week that followed was intense. Days blurred into nights, as lawyers drafted agreements and press releases were carefully worded. Thursday morning, Mia burst into my office with a tablet. Forbes, Business Insider, The Wall Street Journal, they're all running the story. My face stared back at me from the Forbes website. The headline read, Disruptor Alert, Olivia Reed named youngest female CEO in tech after landmark investment deal. My stomach dropped. The announcement wasn't supposed to go public until after I'd had a chance to tell my family in person. I quickly scanned the article. Our PR firm had included my background in the press kit, apparently rushing the release to coincide with a major tech conference happening this week. As if summoned by my thought, my phone began to vibrate with messages. Colleagues, old classmates, distant relatives, all suddenly aware of my success. But nothing from my parents or Nathan. The silence was deafening. After Mia left, I called my parents. My father answered, his voice clipped. I suppose you think we'd be impressed, he interrupted, making a show in the business pages. Dad, I built this company from nothing. No connections, no family support, not even a word of encouragement. Now you've got your name in some articles. We'll see how long it lasts before reality sets in. The reality is that I'm now the CEO of a $90 million company that's changing the industry. This tech bubble you're riding will burst. Nathan's built something solid, something real. I closed my eyes, suddenly tired of the same old narrative. Sunday arrived warm and clear, a perfect day for an outdoor retirement celebration. I sat in my car outside my parents' home, watching guests arrive. People who had witnessed my relegation to the background over the years. With a deep breath, I stepped out of my new Jaguar F-Type, a congratulatory gift to myself that I'd purchased with a small advance from the investment deal that had closed just yesterday. The sleek vehicle was not subtle, nor was it meant to be. As I retrieved a small, elegantly wrapped package, I felt eyes turning in my direction. Cousin Drew stopped mid-conversation, his mouth slightly open. Is that Olivia? I handed him the keys. Mind parking it for me? The driveway is getting crowded. My mother spotted me first, her greeting freezing as she took in my appearance. Gone was the practical daughter they were used to. Today I wore a tailored cream suit with a bold blue silk blouse, designer heels, and jewelry that quietly spoke of success. "Olivia," she managed, "you look different." I approached my father at the grill. "Dad," I said, extending the small package, "happy retirement." He turned, his expression unreadable. He accepted the gift with a nod but made no move to open it. "You didn't need to bring anything," he said stiffly. "I wanted to," I replied, maintaining eye contact. As I walked away, I heard one of his friends say, "Bob, isn't that your daughter who's been in the news? The CEO?" Nathan and his wife Jennifer watched me approach with poorly concealed surprise. "Quite an entrance, sis," Nathan said. "Nice car." Jennifer cut in. "We read about your company. It's very impressive. Why didn't you tell anyone what you were working on all these years?" "I did," I answered simply. "Many times. No one was interested in listening." Nathan shifted uncomfortably, clearly remembering the family dinners where my attempts to discuss my business were brushed aside. "Well, we're all certainly interested now," Jennifer continued. "Everyone's talking about that valuation, $90 million. I noticed heads turning at nearby tables when she said the figure. Whispers spread like ripples in a pond. "Thank you," I said. "It's been a long road, but the technology is revolutionary." Nathan cleared his throat. "I'd love to hear more about it sometime. My company might even be interested in implementing something like that." The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 years ago, I'd approached Nathan about a potential partnership. He had declined, suggesting I focus on something more established first. "I'll have my assistant reach out," I replied, the polite corporate response coming easily now. As the afternoon progressed, the dynamic shifted palpably. Relatives who had previously gravitated toward Nathan now sought me out, asking about NeuroSync, about what it was like to be featured in Forbes, about my secrets to success. My father remained by the grill, watching this transformation of his usually overlooked daughter with an unreadable expression. He had still not opened my gift, a custom-engraved watch bearing the inscription, "To new beginnings. Love, Olivia." Eventually, my father tapped his glass for attention. He began with anecdotes from his years as an engineer, then turned to family acknowledgments. And of course, I'm proud of my children. Nathan, who's making his mark at Hamilton Financial, recently promoted to vice president. A polite round of applause followed. "And Olivia," my father continued, his voice faltering slightly, "who apparently has been quietly building something none of us fully understood." The yard was silent now, the tension palpable. "I always said she was the emotional one," he added with a small laugh. "It seems I may have underestimated how far that emotional intelligence could take her." It wasn't an apology, not even close, but it was the first public acknowledgement from my father that he might have been wrong about me. As glasses were raised, I saw something new in many eyes: respect. As the night progressed, I found a moment alone with my father. He stood at the edge of the yard, nursing a whiskey. "You haven't opened your gift," I said. He looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. I wanted to wait until it was quieter. "So," he said finally, "CEO?" "Yes." "Of a $90 million company?" "Yes." "And the youngest woman to do it, according to those articles?" "That's what they say." A long pause followed. "I don't understand it," he admitted. "This tech stuff. In my day, business was straightforward." "You don't need to understand the technology, Dad. Just understand that I built something valuable, something lasting." He nodded slowly, then gestured toward the front of the house. "That car? That's quite a statement." "It wasn't meant to be a statement. It was meant to be a reward for years of hard work." "Still," he said, his voice lower, "pulling up like that after all those articles, you knew what you were doing." "Yes," I admitted, "I did." 2 months later, with our funding secure and expansion plans underway, NeuroSync's new headquarters opened in downtown Columbus. To my surprise, my entire family attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony. My mother hugged me tightly. "We're so proud of you, Olivia. I'm sorry if we didn't show it before." Nathan approached next. "This is incredible, sis. I had no idea this was what you were building." "That's because you never asked," I replied, but without the bitterness that would have colored such a statement months ago. My father stood near the entrance, taking in the sleek architecture. He wore the watch I had given him, a small gesture, but significant. I walked over to him. "Thank you for coming." He nodded. "Wouldn't have missed it." "You know, Dad, all those times you called me useless, told me I wasn't the bright one. It hurt, but it also pushed me to prove you wrong." He looked at me, his expression a complex mix of pride and regret. "You certainly did that." "Yes," I agreed, "I did." And in that moment, standing in the building that bore my company's name, surrounded by the empire I had built, I finally felt free of the need for his approval. I was Olivia Reed, CEO, visionary, and architect of my own success, and no one would ever call me useless again. The sound echoed first, a sharp crack of knuckles against bone. Time slowed as my father's fist connected with my jaw, and I felt something give way inside my mouth. Warm copper flooded my tongue as my front tooth shattered, the fragments mixing with blood. "You think you get to keep your paycheck when your sister needs it?" Dad's face loomed inches from mine, pores visible beneath 2-day stubble, coffee and cigarette breath washing over me as he growled each word. Behind him, Mom's expression shifted from shock to something more disturbing. Satisfaction. I staggered backward, one hand pressed against my bleeding mouth, the other reaching for the kitchen counter to steady myself. The gap where my tooth had been pulsed with electric pain as blood spilled between my fingers, pattering onto the pristine white tile floor. "My name is Renee. I'm 26 and a financial analyst. This is the story of how I turned my family's parasitic control against them." "Parasites should learn to obey," Mom said, her voice light, almost sing-song as she watched me bleed. The word parasite hung in the air, their favorite term for me, despite the fact that half my salary already went toward supporting them. My sister Natalie lounged on the living room couch just beyond the kitchen doorway, not even bothering to look up from her phone. "Don't get blood on the floor," she muttered. "It's gross." I tried forming words, wanted to explain that I'd already paid half Natalie's rent last month, bought her groceries twice, covered her phone bill, but the taste of metal and the throbbing in my jaw made speech impossible. Dad straightened his shoulders, towering over me. "You'll transfer your entire salary by tonight, or I'll make sure you can't work at all." His voice dropped to that dangerous register I'd known since childhood, the tone that meant consequences were coming. Natalie finally glanced up from her screen, smirking. "She has a point," she said to Mom. "You can't just let parasites walk around thinking they have rights." They laughed together as though sharing an inside joke. I stumbled toward the sink, needing to rinse the blood away, reaching for a paper towel. Mom yanked the roll from my grasp. "That's for guests," she said flatly, as though I were a stranger who'd wandered in off the street. Instead, I grabbed a rag from under the counter. It smelled of mildew and old grease. The metallic taste in my mouth intensified, making my stomach turn. "You think I'm joking?" Dad stepped closer, his shadow completely covering mine. "I'll call your boss right now and tell him you've been stealing. See how fast you lose that job." Through the tears blurring my vision, I looked directly at him. The physical pain was nothing compared to the humiliation burning through my chest, settling like a stone in my stomach. Natalie laughed again, still scrolling through her phone. "Make sure you tell him she's unstable, too. No one wants to hire a drama queen." Something shifted within me then, a tectonic plate moving beneath years of built-up pressure. I straightened my back despite my trembling body. They wanted me to break, to beg, to collapse. They fed on reactions. Instead, I looked directly into my father's eyes and said quietly, "You'll regret this." His eyes narrowed, the vein in his temple visibly pulsing. "You're already regretting it," he said, tapping the side of his own tooth in mockery. Mom chuckled, shaking her head as though I were a stubborn toddler refusing vegetables. You've always thought you were smarter than us, she said, but you're nothing without family. Remember that. Natalie finally set down her phone, sitting forward with sudden interest. Actually, let's make this easy, she said, eyes gleaming. Just give me your banking password. I'll transfer it myself. I stared at her, the audacity almost surreal against the backdrop of my physical pain. You've lost your mind. Her face hardened. No, you've lost your place in this family, and it's about to get worse if you keep talking. I walked slowly from the kitchen, one hand still holding my jaw. Dad called after me, "Don't be late with that transfer." Their laughter followed me down the hallway, each note driving into my spine like a nail. Inside my bedroom, I locked the door and sank to the floor. The mirror on my dresser caught my reflection, swollen lip, missing tooth, eyes burning with something beyond tears. I touched the empty space in my mouth and felt something else take root deep inside me. It wasn't just pain or even anger, it was clarity. For years, they'd taken everything. My money, my time, my dignity, and called it family duty. For years, I'd told myself that if I just gave enough, they'd see my worth. But tonight, with my tooth shattered on the kitchen tile, I finally understood. They would never stop. Not unless I made them. And I wasn't going to make them pay with fists or screaming. I was going to make them choke on something much bigger. Something they couldn't spit out. I picked up my phone and opened a blank note. With hands still trembling, no longer from fear but from purpose, I began typing the first pieces of a plan I'd never dared imagine before. I didn't sleep that night. The throbbing in my jaw kept perfect time with the ideas racing through my mind. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, recalling every time they'd called me a leech, a burden, a mistake. By morning, the pain in my mouth had become background noise compared to the sharp electric focus in my mind. When I walked into the kitchen, Dad was already at the table, coffee mug in hand. Natalie was in her silk robe scrolling through her phone, and Mom was frying eggs as though nothing had happened. "Well," Dad said without looking up, "transfer go through yet?" I didn't answer. I simply set my bag on the counter, pulled out my keys, and headed for the door. "You're not walking out without paying up," he barked. I turned just enough to meet his eyes. "You'll get what's coming." He laughed like I'd told the funniest joke in the world. Mom smirked from the stove. "She's finally learning to threaten like family." I drove straight to work, but not to clock in. After 3 years there, I knew exactly how things ran, where files were kept, who talked to whom, and most importantly, who owed favors. And one person in particular owed me more than one. 3 years ago, I'd covered for my coworker, Vincent, when he'd botched a major client order. It had saved his job, and Vincent had never forgotten it. When I showed him my broken tooth and explained what my parents had done, his eyes widened in shock. "That's insane," he said, voice low. Then he leaned closer. "And I think I can help you." His expression shifted to something calculating. "You know that efficiency system you've been developing for months? The one you never showed anyone?" I nodded slowly. "It's good, real good. But if you want to make it worth something, we need to make sure your name's on it in a way they can't touch." Vincent was right. The project was mine. An efficiency system I'd built for our biggest client. If it worked, it would be worth more than my entire annual salary. And my parents, if they ever caught wind of it, would find a way to bleed it dry. So instead of letting it become company property, I filed the intellectual property rights that very afternoon under my name alone, completely separate from work. That was step 1. Step 2 was personal. I started digging, methodically, deliberately. Every time my parents bragged about their spotless reputation in town, I'd smile silently. I knew better. The unpaid debts they conveniently forgot to mention, the charity events they claimed to donate to but never did, the way Natalie borrowed other people's credit cards and called it loans. It was all there in receipts, emails, and photos I'd kept out of habit. I'd always been the organized one in the family, documenting everything in case they tried to blame me for their financial mistakes. All I had to do was connect the dots. At home, they assumed my quiet demeanor meant fear. That assumption made them bolder. Natalie would wave shopping bags in my face, saying, "This is what your money's for." Mom would casually mention my empty bank balance like it was a running joke. Dad would pat my shoulder and whisper, "Better get used to it, parasite." I played along. I even transferred them small amounts here and there, just enough to keep them confident I remained under their thumb. Meanwhile, I was building something they couldn't see. By the third week, my plan was complete. It wasn't just about exposing them. That would be too easy. It was about taking away the one thing they valued more than my money, their control. I would make them watch as every door they thought they owned slammed shut in their faces. It started with Natalie. She had an upcoming exclusive fashion event, her golden ticket to a modeling contract she'd been chasing for years. She'd been bragging about it nonstop, telling everyone how she'd finally be the face people notice. I made one phone call, not to ruin the event. No, I wanted her to go, but I wanted her to arrive and see exactly what I'd arranged. I'd contacted the event organizer, sending proof of how Natalie had been using her supposed modeling expenses to purchase items she later resold online for profit. Money our parents had siphoned from local charity events. They'd need to know this before allowing her to represent their brand. Then came my parents. They were hosting a dinner for the local business association, a night they'd been hyping for weeks as proof they were pillars of the community. It was the perfect stage, not for them, but for me. Because by the time that night arrived, their own words, their own cruelty, and every dirty little secret they'd hidden would be sitting quietly in the hands of the people they most wanted to impress. When I looked in the mirror that morning, I saw the same missing tooth. But my eyes belonged to someone new, someone who had stopped obeying. They were about to learn what happens when a parasite bites back. The night of the business association dinner, our house smelled of expensive catering and desperate ambition. Mom wore her pearls, Dad squeezed into a suit he couldn't really afford, and Natalie floated around in her designer dress like visiting royalty. They barely glanced at me when I came down the stairs. "You're not invited," Mom said without turning her head. I smiled. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Dad's jaw tightened, but he didn't push it. They thought I'd come to grovel or play nice in front of their guests. That was the beauty of it. As guests began arriving, the dining room sparkled. Silverware polished to a shine, crystal glasses standing at attention. I stayed near the edge of the room, silent, watching the performance unfold. Every handshake Dad gave was calculated. Every compliment Mom offered was rehearsed. Natalie busied herself live streaming her outfit to her followers, positioning herself for flattering angles beneath the chandelier. Then I saw him. Mr. Kingsley, the association president, a man whose approval Dad had chased for years. And in his hand was the thick, sealed envelope I'd sent 2 days earlier, delivered to his office by courier, with instructions to bring it to tonight's dinner. Inside that envelope was everything. The unpaid contractor bills my parents pretended didn't exist. Proof they'd funneled money from charity events into Natalie's personal account. Audio recordings of them bragging about manipulating neighbors for favors. And just for impact, a neat little note quoting my mother. Parasites should learn to obey. Mr. Kingsley didn't approach them right away. He waited until every key guest was present, conversations flowing, wine glasses filled. Then he walked deliberately to my father, envelope in hand. I watched Dad's face transform from smug to stone in seconds. Mom leaned in, reading over his shoulder, her pearl necklace trembling against her neck as her breathing quickened. Natalie stopped mid-laugh, glancing between them as the atmosphere shifted. Whispers started. People who'd been smiling minutes before now stared with furrowed brows. One woman actually stepped back from Mom as though she'd been contaminated. Dad attempted a chuckle, tried to wave it off, but Mr. Kingsley's voice carried clearly through the sudden quiet. "Your name doesn't belong on our board, Frank. Not after this." I moved before they could spot me in the crowd, slipping out through the side door. Vincent waited across the street at the cafe where we had a perfect view of the entrance. Within 20 minutes, guests began leaving in clusters, some not even bothering with goodbyes. Natalie emerged first, clutching her phone like a lifeline, her perfectly contoured face now blotchy and wet. She'd just been informed the fashion event was full. No more spots, not even for influencers. Funny how that happened right after I forwarded the evidence of her fraud to the event coordinator earlier that day. Then my parents appeared. Dad's tie hung loose, his eyes darting around as though searching for escape. Mom's lipstick was smudged, her precious pearls mysteriously absent. They stood alone on the sidewalk, the buzz of their social aspirations silenced. For the first time, they weren't the center of attention. They were just nobody. I stepped outside, letting my heels click deliberately against the pavement. When they saw me, Mom's mouth opened but produced no sound. Dad's voice cracked as he said, "You." I held up my phone. A single picture filled the screen, my broken tooth on the night he'd knocked it out. Underneath, one sentence. This is where it started. I didn't yell. I didn't have to. I simply looked at them the way they'd always looked at me, as though they weren't worth the air they breathed. Then I walked past, brushing Natalie's shoulder just enough to make her flinch. By the time I reached the corner, I could hear Mom hissing accusations at Dad, her voice tight with panic. It didn't matter. Their perfect little world had shattered, and the pieces would never fit back together. They'd built their lives on control, and now they had none. And every time they remembered how it happened, they'd see the girl they called a parasite, the one they thought they owned, the one who made them choke on their own pride. 2 weeks later, I moved into my own apartment across town. They tried calling me repeatedly, but I blocked their numbers immediately. When they began showing up at my workplace unannounced, I provided security with photos of my injuries and filed a restraining order, which was granted within days. My parents divorced 3 months later, their relationship unable to withstand the public humiliation and financial strain. Last I heard, Dad moved to another state while Mom stayed in town, though her social standing never recovered. Natalie moved to another city, her modeling dreams crushed. She reached out once through email asking for money, but I never responded. Some parasites, I realized, never learn. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles. Zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.